Hi, and welcome to the African Cinema Podcast. This is your host, Tendai, and today we'll be talking about the extraordinary story of Ugandan cinema. From the colonial suppression of artistic expression to the viral phenomenon of Wakaliwood, and from the grassroots emergence of Kinna-Uganda to contemporary films that have now started streaming on Netflix. Uganda's cinematic narrative represents perhaps the most dramatic transformation in African film history. Now, to understand Uganda's delayed cinematic emergence, we must first confront a fundamental historical reality. Uganda's cinema history begins not with celebration, but with systematic cultural suppression. When Britain declared Uganda a protectorate in 1894, the colonial administration established a framework that would profoundly inhibit indigenous artistic development for over 7 decades. Unlike colonies such as Nigeria, Ghana, or Kenya, Uganda's protectorate status created what film historian Lwamanya describes as limited integration into the British Empire's cultural exchanges. This isolation was not accidental, it was very much structural. British interests in Uganda were exclusively economic, viewing the territory through Winston Churchill's colonial lens as the Pearl of Africa, valued solely for its agricultural potential. The most significant early film initiative was the Bantu educational kinema experiment, conducted between 1935 and 1937 under J. Merrill Davis. This project produced films such as Veterinary Training of African Natives and Tropical Hookworm, titles that immediately revealed the paternalistic orientation of British views at the time. These were films made for Africans, but not necessarily by Africans, establishing a colonial cinema paradigm that fundamentally excluded indigenous voices from the filmmaking process. Leslie Allen Northcutt, the field director of the Beke project, and George Chiti Latham, the educational director, genuinely believed they were creating cultural appropriate educational content. Yet their approach embodied the fundamental contradiction of colonial cinema: the assumption that authentic African stories could be told without actual African storytellers. The establishment of the Colonial Film Unit in 1939 under producer William Sellers further institutionalized this exclusion. Films like Daybreak in Udi represented sophisticated propaganda machinery designed to legitimize colonial rule while systematically preventing the emergence of indigenous cinematic voices. What makes this period particularly significant is not what was created, but what was prevented. Uganda posed rich oral storytelling traditions, sophisticated ceremonial performances, and complex narrative frameworks that could have formed the foundation of a vibrant film culture. Instead, these traditions were marginalized, viewed as primitive antecedents to colonial modernity, rather than sophisticated cultural forms worthy of cinematic expression. Independence in 1962 should have marked the beginning of Ugandan cinema. Instead, it initiated one of the most devastating periods for artistic expression in African history. Uganda's peaceful transition to independence, achieved through negotiation rather than revolutionary uprising, created an ironic cultural vacuum. Without the galvanizing national ideals that characterized independence movements elsewhere, Uganda lacked the unified cultural identity that typically fuels national cinema movements. The political trajectory that followed independence reads like a catalogue of cultural destruction. Milton Obote's constitutional suspension in 1966 and self-declaration as president in 1967 began 2 decades of systematic repression that would devastate Uganda's intellectual and creative class. But it was Idi Amin's regime from 1971 to 1979 that represented the absolute nadir of Ugandan cultural expression. The murder of playwright and actor Byron Kawadwa in 1977, who was killed shortly after his Luganda language play Oluyimba Iwa Wankoko, was perceived as political satire, which exemplifies the regime's approach to artistic expression. This was cultural terrorism designed to eliminate the very possibility of creative dissident. Amin's expulsion of the Indian population in 1972 created a particularly devastating blow to Uganda's nascent film infrastructure. The Indian community had operated many of Uganda's early cinemas, and these facilities were subsequently handed to Amin's associates, who systematically destroyed them through mismanagement and neglect. This was the deliberate dismantling of spaces where collective cultural imagination could flourish. The subsequent period, including the disputed 1980 elections and the 5-year Ugandan Bush War until 1986, effectively halted all cultural development. During these decades, theatre emerged as the primary form of entertainment precisely because it required minimal infrastructure and could be more easily hidden from state surveillance. This theatrical dominance would later profoundly influence the performance styles and narrative approaches of early Ugandan cinema. The trauma of this period created what can only be described as a cultural lost generation. Ugandans who had little to no exposure to cinema, creating audience development challenges that persist until today. The systematic nature of this destruction means that when Ugandan filmmakers finally emerged in the 2000s, they had to simultaneously rebuild production capabilities, audience appreciation, and cultural habits of cinema going. Yoweri Museveni's ascension to power in 1986 marked not the immediate birth of Ugandan cinema, but the beginning of conditions that would eventually make it possible. This nearly 2-decade period represents a fascinating case in how political stability, economic recovery, and technological change gradually create the preconditions for cultural renaissance. The stabilization period was characterized by what might be called accidental film education. International productions like Mira Nair's Mississippi Masala in 1991 and later The Last King of Scotland in 2006 provided Ugandans with a behind-the-scenes exposure to contemporary filmmaking techniques while demonstrating international interest in Ugandan stories. These productions served as informal film schools, training a generation of local crew members who would later become the backbone of indigenous production. A crucial catalyst emerged from an unexpected source: the HIV/AIDS crisis of the late 1980s and early 1990s. The government's multi-sectoral prevention campaign placed theatre at the center of public health communication. Groups like the Bakayimbira drama actors became instrumental in promoting the ABC approach: abstinence, being faithful, and condom use. When these productions began being recorded on video for mass distribution, they represented Uganda's first significant venture into filmed content. The Ebonies, a local drama group, played a pioneering role through their Kampala-based studio, producing primetime television shows including That's Life, Mwatu, and Bibao, programs that became iconic for their humorous examination of Ugandan family life. These shows effectively created the first generation of Ugandan screen content while training essential personnel in writing, acting, and technical production. Mira Nair's establishment of the Maisha Film Lab in 2004 represents a watershed moment in Ugandan cinema development. This initiative provided systematic training and support for emerging African filmmakers, creating the first formal infrastructure for filmmaking education in Uganda since independence. The lab's emphasis on telling African stories from African perspectives provided a crucial conceptual framework that would directly influence the emergence of Kinna-Uganda. The gradual introduction of digital technology during this period created unprecedented possibilities for low-cost filming. As digital cameras and editing equipment became accessible and affordable, they opened filmmaking possibilities for Ugandans who lacked traditional industry infrastructure and funding. This technological democratization proved essential to the grassroots emergence of Uganda's national cinema. The year 2005 represents the most significant watershed moment in Ugandan cultural history since independence. This was the year that Hajji Ashraf Ssemwogerere, a qualified dentist who had returned to school to study drama, released Feelings Struggle, the film universally recognized as the first authentic Kinna-Uganda production. The term Kinna-Uganda itself embodies profound cultural significance. It explicitly defines cinema made in Uganda for Ugandan audiences by Ugandan filmmakers, a deliberate rejection of the colonial pattern of films being made for rather than by Africans. This linguistic choice reflects a conscious assertion of cultural sovereignty that extends far beyond entertainment. Ssemwogerere's background exemplifies the unconventional pathways that characterized early Ugandan filmmaking. His transition from dentistry to drama to filmmaking represents the kind of career fluidity that emerging cultural industries both require and also create. Feeling Struggle told the story of a girl stolen from her parents as an infant for ritual sacrifice in modern-day Uganda, a narrative that addressed contemporary social issues within distinctly Ugandan cultural context. Despite its historical significance, the film faced considerable challenges that would become characteristic of early Kinna-Uganda productions: limited marketing resources, inadequate distribution networks, and production values that couldn't compete with foreign films. Yet Ssemwogerere's persistence was remarkable. His follow-up film, Murder in the City, made in 2006, dramatized the controversial case of Dr. Aggrey Kiyingi, demonstrating the potential for Ugandan cinema to address contemporary and social controversies. His most successful work, Mukajanga, Passion of the Uganda Martyrs, made in 2009, represented a creative evolution toward historic epic storytelling. By focusing on the execution of the Uganda martyrs, 45 Christian converts sentenced to death by Kabaka Mwanga II in the late 1880s, Ssemwogerere demonstrated how Ugandan filmmakers could mine their rich historical heritage for compelling cinematic narratives. The diversity of voices during this foundational period was remarkable. Cindy Magara's Fate, made in 2006, established her as the first woman to direct a Ugandan film, while Donald Mugisha's Divizionz, made in 2007, achieved the historic distinction of becoming the first Kinna-Uganda film showcased at a major international film festival when it screened at Berlin. Matthew Bishanga's Battle of the Souls, made in 2007, demonstrated higher production values and received 10 nominations at the African Movie Academy Awards. These early films established several persistent characteristics of Ugandan cinema: extremely low budgets that necessitated creative production approaches, emphasis on contemporary social issues affecting ordinary Ugandans, use of local languages, particularly Luganda, and grassroots distribution models that relied on community networks rather than formal cinema chains. No discussion of Ugandan cinema would be complete without examining one of the most extraordinary phenomena in contemporary world cinema, Wakaliwood. Isaac Nabwana's ultra-low-budget action films represent a unique convergence of extreme financial constraint, unlimited creativity, and viral digital culture that fundamentally challenged global assumptions about filmmaking. Nabwana, known professionally as Nabwana IGG, created Who Killed Captain Alex in 2010 with an estimated budget of $85. This figure isn't merely a production constraint, it represents a philosophical approach to filmmaking that prioritizes storytelling ingenuity over technical sophistication. The film's subsequent viral success, with trailers accumulating millions of YouTube views, demonstrated that authenticity and creativity could overcome any budget limitations. Wakaliwood films established a distinctive aesthetic that emerged directly from resource limitations. Nabwana and his collaborators created their own equipment, building cameras from scratch and developing innovative techniques for action sequences and special effects. The famous squibs, made from condoms filled with red food coloring and tied to fishing lines, became legendary examples of necessity-driven innovation. The integration of a video joker narration, a uniquely Ugandan cultural practice where local commentators provide live translation and humorous commentary during film screenings, represented a sophisticated fusion of traditional and contemporary entertainment forms. It was a distinct African approach to film consumption that transformed passive viewing into interactive community experience. The international partnership between Nabwana and American filmmaker Alan Hoffmanis exemplifies the potential for cross-cultural collaboration while maintaining authentic local character. Hoffmanis' relocation to Uganda to help promote Wakaliwood internationally, culminating in a starring role in Bad Black, made in 2016, demonstrated how global interests could support rather than co-opt local filmmaking traditions. Wakaliwood's impact extended far beyond entertainment. The movement demonstrated that technical sophistication was not necessarily the most important factor in creating engaging cinema, influencing filmmakers from both within Uganda and internationally. The success challenged colonial assumptions about African cultural production while proving that Ugandan stories could find global audiences without compromising their essential local character. The phenomenon also contributed to changing international perceptions of low-budget filmmaking, with global audiences appreciating the creativity and ingenuity required to create entertaining action films with minimal resources. This recognition established principles that influenced contemporary discussions about accessible filmmaking and democratic cultural production. The contemporary period of Ugandan cinema from 2015 to the current day represents a fascinating tension between increasing professionalization and the maintenance of grassroots authenticity. This era has witnessed higher production values, international recognition, and unprecedented access to global distribution platforms while grappling with questions of cultural identity and commercial viability. The philosophical divide between uptown and downtown filmmaking approaches reflects broader questions about cultural production in the global economy. The uptown contingent filmmakers like Caroline Kamia, Dilmen Dila, and Joseph Ken Sebagala emphasize formalism, higher production values, and appeal to a middle class and international audiences. Their works including Kamia's Imani, made in 2010, Dila's Felicitas Fable, made in 2014, and Sebagala's House Arrest, made in 2016, demonstrate sophisticated cinematography and narrative techniques. Meanwhile, the downtown movement, exemplified by Wakaliwood's continued production, maintains emphasis on grassroots accessibility and experimental approaches. It represents different philosophies about the purpose and audience for Ugandan cinema. A landmark achievement occurred in 2020 when Lukman Ali's The Girl in the Yellow Jumper became the first Ugandan film distributed on Netflix. The milestone demonstrated that Ugandan cinema had achieved sufficient technical and narrative sophistication to compete in global markets while maintaining distinctive national characteristics. The film's global streaming success opened unprecedented possibilities for other Ugandan filmmakers to access international distribution networks and audiences. The contemporary period has now witnessed remarkable diversification in genres and approaches. Raymond Malinga's animated short A Kalabada Ate My Homework, made in 2018, secured placement at the Cannes Film Festival, whilst Maurice Mugisha's Tembele, made in 2022, became Uganda's first ever submission to the Academy Awards for Best International Feature. These achievements represent not merely individual successes, but also institutional recognition of Ugandan cinema's artistic maturity. Institutional development has been crucial during this period. The Pearl International Film Festival, founded by Moses Magezi in 2011, and the Ugandan Film Festival, organized by the Uganda Communications Commission, have created essential platforms for showcasing local films while facilitating connections between Ugandan filmmakers and international industry professionals. Government support has increased significantly, with Uganda's third National Development Plan explicitly treating culture and media, including film, as engines of economic growth. The UCC's Content Development Support Program, launched in 2020, now provides grants to Ugandan filmmakers, while UNESCO initiatives have introduced tax incentives for local productions. Understanding Ugandan cinema requires examining the deep cultural traditions that inform contemporary filmmaking. The storytelling techniques, character archetypes, and moral frameworks established during pre-colonial periods continue to influence Ugandan filmmakers today, providing cultural continuity that distinguishes Ugandan cinema from other African national cinemas. Traditional Ugandan oral narrative traditions emphasized community-centered stories and moral instruction, characteristics that persist in contemporary Kinna-Uganda films. This continuity suggests that despite decades of colonial and post-colonial disruption, fundamental cultural patterns have survived and found new expression through cinema. The integration of local languages, particularly Luganda, represents more than accessibility. It embodies cultural preservation and identity assertion. MultiChoice and the Uganda Communications Commission have deliberately promoted cultural preservation through content choices, emphasizing local languages, using relatable Ugandan names for shows, and sponsoring indigenous film categories at festivals. Films increasingly serve as cultural documentation, preserving language, showcasing architectural heritage, and providing educational value by portraying traditional practices alongside contemporary issues. This documentary function positions cinema as essential cultural infrastructure rather than mere entertainment. The emphasis on social commentary in Ugandan films reflects traditional storytelling functions. Early Kinna-Uganda productions focused heavily on contemporary social issues affecting ordinary Ugandans, such as poverty, corruption, relationship challenges, and urban life difficulties. These films serve simultaneously as entertainment and social commentary, addressing problems mainstream media often ignores while providing audiences with representations of their own experiences. The development of Ugandan cinema cannot be separated from the gradual construction of institutional frameworks supporting film production, distribution, and appreciation. This institutional development represents one of the most significant achievements of the contemporary period. The Ugandan Communications Commission's role has been transformative. Beyond organizing the annual Uganda Film Festival, the UCC has introduced local content quotas for television broadcasters and supported content development through capacity building programs. These regulatory interventions have created market conditions favorable to local production while ensuring stories maintain visibility in domestic media landscapes. MultiChoice's investment in local content through Pearl Magic channels has provided crucial platforms for Ugandan productions while offering professional development opportunities. This commercial support has enabled high production values and more sustainable revenue models for filmmakers. Training initiatives have also been essential to industry development. Beyond Mira Nair's pioneering Maisha Film Lab, various NGO-supported workshops and emerging film schools in Kampala have created systematic approaches to filmmaking education. These programs have produced technically competent professionals while maintaining emphasis on authentic African storytelling. The challenge of distribution remains significant. Despite festival successes and international recognition, many Ugandan filmmakers struggle with revenue generation due to piracy, limited cinema infrastructure, and competition from better funded international productions. The emergence of streaming platforms offers new possibilities, but sustainable economic models for local production remain within their developmental priorities. Professional networks have become increasingly important. The establishment of Pearlwood in 2018 as an umbrella film association has provided institutional representation for the industry while facilitating connections between local filmmakers and international opportunities. These networks enable knowledge sharing, collaborative production, and advocacy for supportive policy frameworks. The contemporary Ugandan cinema landscape is characterized by remarkable diversity of voices, genres, and approaches. This new generation of filmmakers benefits from improved training opportunities, better technology access, and growing audience recognition while maintaining the innovative spirit that has characterized Ugandan cinema from its inception. Afri, a musician and filmmaker, represents the intersection of advocacy and entertainment through her documentary Little Faith, which won Best Documentary at the Ugandan Film Festival and achieved international acclaim. The establishment of Colorverse to mentor female creatives demonstrates how successful filmmakers are creating supportive infrastructure for emerging talents. Charlene Wanika's work, including her experimental short Erasure made in 2018 and recent project I Eat What I Like, challenges conventional narratives while amplifying positive stories about women. Her approach shows how contemporary Ugandan filmmakers are engaging with gender issues and social transformation. Angela Emuon's debut short film, Sunday, won multiple awards, including Best African Film Short at the Mashariki African Film Festival, demonstrating how Ugandan filmmakers are achieving recognition throughout the Continental Film Festival circuit. Ali Musoke's establishment of Stone Age Pictures made in 2014 and Film Possible made in 2018, a non-profit supporting emerging African filmmakers, illustrates how successful practitioners are building institutional support for the next generation. His collaborations with BBC, HBO, National Geographic, and Google demonstrate the integration of Ugandan filmmakers into global production networks. The emergence of animation through creators like Shivon Nsimenta, whose 3D animation Mika won Best International Film at the Seine Odyssey Film Festival, represents genre diversification that suggests the maturity and versatility of contemporary Ugandan cinema. These emerging voices maintain connection to the grassroots authenticity that has characterized Ugandan cinema while demonstrating technical sophistication and international competitiveness. Their work suggests that Ugandan cinema is successfully navigating the balance between global accessibility and cultural specificity. Despite remarkable progress, Ugandan cinema faces persistent structural challenges that reflect broader questions about cultural production in the global economy. These challenges are not merely technical or financial, as they represent fundamental questions about cultural sovereignty, economic stability, and artistic integrity. Funding limitations remain the most significant constraint. Unlike film industries with government support or established private investment, most Ugandan filmmakers continue to work with extremely limited budgets. While this constraint has historically driven innovation and creativity, it also limits the technical sophistication and marketing reach necessary for broader commercial success. Limited access to state-of-the-art equipment and technology creates competitive disadvantages in global markets where technical production values significantly influence distribution opportunities. The policymaking process struggles to keep pace with rapid technological evolution and industry trends, creating regulatory gaps that inhibit systematic industry development. Distribution challenges persist despite streaming platform successes. The underdeveloped domestic cinema infrastructure means that even successful films often struggle to reach Ugandan audiences, while competition from better funded international productions continues to dominate local entertainment circles. Corporate engagement remains limited, with many Ugandan companies not yet understanding film industry dynamics or opportunities for product placement and sponsorship. This limited private sector engagement constrains both funding possibilities and market development. Yet there are reasons for considerable optimism. The passionate commitment of filmmakers to telling uniquely Ugandan stories, drawing the country's rich cultural heritage and complex socio-political history provides sustainable creative foundations. The independent nature of Kinna-Uganda offers complete creative freedom, enabling filmmakers to explore narratives and expose Ugandan culture to global audiences without external constraints. The sector's potential as a major employer and driver of economic growth and tourism is increasingly recognized by government and international development organizations. Film's capacity for preserving heritage and values while addressing contemporary challenges positions cinema as essential cultural infrastructure rather than luxury entertainment. Professional networks continue expanding within Uganda and internationally, creating opportunities for collaboration, knowledge sharing, and market access. The establishment of formal training programs and institutional support structures suggests that the industry development is becoming systematic rather than dependent on individual initiative. In conclusion, the story of Ugandan cinema represents one of the most extraordinary cultural transformations in African history, actually. From colonial suppression through decades of political devastation to the emergence of a vibrant, internationally recognized film industry, Uganda's cinematic journey embodies profound themes of resilience, creativity, and cultural sovereignty. The trajectory from Hajji Ashraf's Ssemwogerere's pioneering film struggle to Lukman Ali's Netflix success with The Girl in the Yellow Jumper illustrates not just industrial development but also cultural renaissance. The philosophical tensions between uptown and downtown approaches, rather than weakening the industry, have created rich ecosystem diversity that serves different audiences while maintaining authentic Ugandan character. Wakali's global reach demonstrated that originality and resourcefulness could overcome any budget limitations, while contemporary filmmakers showed that Ugandan cinema can compete technically and artistically with international productions. The integration of traditional storytelling elements with contemporary filmmaking techniques has created distinctive narrative approaches that distinguish Ugandan cinema within the broader African film landscape. The institutional development from the Ugandan Film Festival through training programs to streaming platform integration suggests that Ugandan cinema is transitioning from grassroots experimentation to sustainable industry. Yet, the maintenance of cultural authenticity and social commentary traditions ensures that commercial success won't come at the expense of cultural identity. As Uganda's filmmakers continue telling stories that expose global audiences to the richness of Ugandan narratives, they participate in broader conversations about cultural representation, economic development, and artistic expression. Their work demonstrates that authentic local stories, told with passion and creativity, can find global audiences while maintaining essential cultural specificity. The future of Ugandan cinema appears bright precisely because it has maintained the grassroots authenticity and innovative spirit that has characterized its emergence, while developing the technical sophistication and institutional support necessary for sustainable growth. As Niwamanya observed, there is an untapped reservoir of stories that have been kept secret by decades of social and artistic repression. It's time to open the floodgates. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Ugandan cinema's remarkable journey. The story of Kinna-Uganda reminds us that authentic cultural expression, sustained by passion and creativity, can overcome any historical obstacles, actually, to create lasting artistic contributions to world cinema. And join us next time on the African Cinema Podcast, where we delve into the history of Tanzanian cinema. Ciao.